Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Lounge Alley. This is Figure Drawing Basics Part 93. I am your host, and I'm going to continue from where I left off yesterday, which was a bit of a disaster. I had no idea that the audio was just completely off, or it wasn't functioning properly. To me, it sounded like everything was totally fine. I did a little bit of tweaking. I'm guessing I fixed it. So, and it seems like it's working right. So just to continue on from where I was going off yesterday, it was working on more face expressions. So what you're seeing here is a kid face. He's obviously much younger, and the interesting thing about it is that despite their face being young, you could still recognize a sense of emotion there, right? Because what I was talking about yesterday was how as we get older, certain features become more worn in. It's kind of like that idea that I was using before. It's like paper. You know, if you fold paper and you keep folding it in that crease, it becomes more and more visible. It becomes more and more prominent, and it becomes easier for you to like fold it into that crease. So that's kind of what happens to our skin, you know, over a period of time. If we frown a lot, or if we laugh a lot, or you know, whatever it is, whatever emotions that we licked or we have, they start to leave an imprint on our face. So people who are frustrated a lot, or angry a lot, or furrow their brows a lot, as they get older, because they keep doing it, it's not like only a set period of time where they're like, I'm only going to do this for 2 years. It's like once they kind of get into that habit, it becomes a habit. It becomes something that they do constantly. So over the years, it becomes the furrowed brow thing. It becomes more and more prominent, and you could see those lines, just like you're able to see it here. As you can see in this example here, you know, these lines right there in the middle, it's over years and years of probably evoking or expressing this sort of emotion. So, you know, they become more prominent. And in some ways, it's good to pay attention to that, because it does add more expression, right? If you were to just like remove those and they would be completely smooth, that area would be completely smooth, I don't think it would be as much of a dramatic expression. But whereas for a young face, you know, they haven't had the years, they haven't had the experiences or the reasons as much to show that sort of expression yet. And most of the time, you know, kids emulate what they see. So it's over a period of time where they start to recognize, like, you know, this is the sort of emotion that I evoke, or this is what I do when I'm frustrated or whatever. And of course, there's natural expression as well, right? Like just naturally out of their own emotions, they tend to express certain things. So yeah, it's just to say that for them, it's not as these features aren't as prominent, like the furrowing of the brows. You're not going to see those really hard lines there, you know. I think that's something that happens over years. And as I mentioned, like how often a person has that sort of emotion, how many years they've spent doing that. But despite that, and this is where I was getting at, you're still able to recognize a certain expression, right? Some sort of feeling, and that feeling that is being conveyed is grief or concern. That's what I'm getting or sensing from this drawing, and that's primarily expressed, I'm going to say, from the eyebrows. I mean, of course, it's all combined together. The expression of the mouth with the eyebrows really send that signal, send that message that this person is experiencing some sort of concern or grief. And it's a great example of subtlety. You know, you're seeing, it's not obviously like as obvious as the previous drawing that I showed you guys, where the brows were really furrowed and the guy looked really frustrated. But as I mentioned before, you know, when jumping into this lesson, it's great to pay attention to your own face expression. Just like have like a handheld mirror in front of you and just draw from that. You know, see what you could capture in your own face expressions. Make certain faces and see how features on the face ripple through. As I mentioned in the previous lesson when we were talking about here, for example, how when the person is smiling, they're sending that skin back. You know, all the skin that comes after the smile is going to have to go somewhere as it moves. So it's going to go underneath the cheekbone. You know, it's going to push it towards that. And since the skin is tight on to the skeletal structure on top of the muscles, it's not going to just like bubble over on top of the cheekbone. So it's being pushed back into this area, and it's creating folds, as you could see over here. And that's something that happens also with age. You know, with younger kids it's less so, and you could see that their faces are more rounded, right? But as they get older and their bone structure starts to grow and all the muscles and skin start to stretch more and more to accommodate that, more definition starts to develop. And because of that, you know, when you are smiling, it doesn't really go over those features. It starts to go under certain places and forming all these definitive lines like you see underneath the eyes, you know, and where the cheeks are as well. It's the same idea there. So it's just this example of how things ripple through, right? So as he smiles, the cheekbones are sent upwards. It creates this crease around. It's also pushing all the skin on top of it towards the eyes. So it's going to create these lines underneath as well. Same thing here, you know, as you could see with this like sneering sort of look. You know, she's pursing her lips together. So that's kind of creating these lines right here to form downwards, as opposed to the side as you see it here. And then the same thing with the furrowing of the brows, right? It's sending everything up, so you could see it's forming this like ripple effect on the forehead. And that's what these lines indicate. And those lines there are also pretty good, like, to pay attention to for dramatic effect, you know, to say even more with that expression. So when you're studying your face in the mirror, just paying attention to like the face expressions that you make and what changes as you do it. It's a great way to go about it. And I think it's very important. You know, face expression is extremely important. It shouldn't be just about anatomy, you know, or how realistic your rendition is of the subject. A good drawing has all that combined together. You know, it has the story, it has the anatomy, it has the perspective, it has the proportions, the expressions, the body language. All that combined together makes for a really good drawing. And that takes time. You know, it sounds like a lot, but really the more you draw, the more you practice, the easier and easier it becomes. It's similar to, you know, the alphabet. There's so much grammar that you have to learn, right? There's so many words that are out there, but the more you read, the easier it becomes for you to pick up words and read more complex complex information and process that. And that all just comes with practice. That's something that also, over time you get better and better at. Though it is embarrassing, there are some people who are, in their 20s who still can't read properly. Like, there's been times where I've encountered it, and it's really, it's frustrating. It's upsetting, that the person's really not putting effort into growing, into developing, and they're kind of like stifled themselves at some point where they just stopped practicing to read or not wanting to read. It's such an amazing experience, having to read something and just instantly in that moment evolving. You hear certain information or you hear a certain perspective and you're never the same after that. Whereas people who don't read, I think they just kind of get stuck at a certain point. But I think that's the other great thing, I guess, about internet and social media and stuff. It pushes people to read because you are reading other people's posts. You're reading your friends' texts. Whereas I think before, let's say in the 90s or something, that wasn't the case. The average person, I think, read much less. But after internet has boomed, and I'm going to say it's even for kids as well, like kids in the 90s, how they interacted with one another and how kids interact with each other now is very different. Just like from the times that I was a teacher and I was teaching younger kids who were like 9 to like 16, there was a drastic difference. I just, in comparison to how I remember kids interacting during that time, during my time, it wasn't just me and my friends. It was just like being in class, being in school, being in different classes as well. We had to like change classes, and there were different kids there, and the way that they were interacting with each other was much different. I think kids now are more aware, I think, and because they're reading, they're able to express themselves better as opposed to back then. They're texting all the time, they're writing all the time, and they're obviously paying attention to their grammar with each other. So it's a positive. I think that's one really good outcome of all that. Kids read more. But I still don't think it's the same as picking up like a novel. If you pick up a novel, if you pick up some book or, some really informative book, that's what you're gaining from it. It's not just entertainment. It's not just like catchphrases and like movie quotes or whatever, or using like hot language, things that are trendy or whatever. It's like processing information that is complex. Like, it makes you think, it makes you try to decipher what the message is. So there's like so many different things that come into play that you don't really get from text messaging, or whatever eye-catching websites there are out right now. So it doesn't really substitute it, but it does help kids get more and more involved with reading, writing, that sort of thing. So I'm just taking time to render this out for the challenge of it. I always want to render, I always want to level up my rendering skills, and this is a great way of doing it. Like studying the shadows and just making sure that it gradually transitions from midtones, from shadows to midtones to highlights, or from highlights to midtones to shadows, and get better and better at that. And this really does remind me of like something that Norman Rockwell would do. Speaking of which, aside from today's special intro, that's going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there's going to be another special intro later this week. And it's already midpoint of the week. It's crazy how fast time is flying. You know, it feels like yesterday was Monday, but today is like already the end of Wednesday, and it's going on to Thursday, and before you know it, the week is over. Wild. And I guess because yesterday the audio was off, you know, I was a lot of it I was talking about the importance of time management. You know, like just this idea that not just for, you know, trying to get your homework done or trying to do better at your job or whatever. It's also just the idea of how much your body is able to withstand. You know, I think for us, we're able to function for 15 hours at peak performance, or like at pretty decent performance, heading over to like 15-hour mark. But after that, we start to like, you know, most of us get tired or we're not as focused. So because we have a certain amount of time within a day before things start to fail for us, and with our bodies, that is, it's best to make use of time before you hit that stage. You know, I think that's something that, you know, if you learn that, if you become incredibly proficient at time management, you're going to achieve a lot more, you know. And it's not only just for that one period. If you get into the habit of really managing your time well, you're able to accomplish more within a day. You could say, okay, for this amount of time, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to practice drawing, and every day dedicate yourself to that. And if you set yourself a certain time frame, then you know this at this time, I'm always going to be doing this. You know, I'm going to be drawing. I'm going to get better at it. And being in that regular schedule, it just makes things easier in your mind, you know, because if you're doing it randomly at certain points, you don't really have a specific schedule, you're not really thinking about it as much, and there's other things that start to get in the way of it, or you start to prioritize something else. Oh, hey, Boomy. Thanks. I'm really glad that you're enjoying it. I actually really like the stuff that I've seen on your YouTube channel. I thought it was really interesting. I've never seen that before, and how all those colors are kind of like synced with the music, and how it like ripples through as you create the content for it. I thought it was really interesting. Are you still doing that? Are you still playing around with music? Boomy3 said, "Oh, seriously, thank you. It's called launch padding." Yes, I still do it occasionally. Yeah, it was really cool, and I did like some of the music. So a lot of the music that you have on there, is that your work that you're coming up with the beats for it, or it's mixing with existing music? I'm gonna do a little bit more shading, and then I'm gonna move on. I believe I'm gonna move on to the next lesson, which is gonna be really interesting. Actually, it's gonna give me an opportunity to fill out all these pages. I'm gonna go back to doing that. I'm gonna talk more about what the next lesson is gonna be. I'm just gonna make sure I render this out well to my liking. Boomy3 said, "So basically you can create your own music and map the music onto the buttons. However, I played projects by other people who used other people's music, so it's kind of like an instrument." Yeah, it's really interesting. I did send you a message on there. So check it out, check it out at your own time, and write me back, because I think it will be pretty interesting content to share. And what better way than have somebody who is part of the Art Lounge Alley. And at this point with the drawing, I'm pretty confident with where things are. So now it's just having to make sure that the values are right. Something I mentioned before, when it comes to rendering stuff, when it comes to drawing the faces or shading or any of that stuff, is nothing is as white as the paper. I think that there are certain highlights that you can use, but predominantly most of the drawing should have some sort of shade to it. I think if you leave too much of a contrast, it becomes kind of flat. Like, there are certain areas that are so much like the paper, it just in comparison to like shadows, like really dark areas, that it's that high contrast flatten things out, because there is always a gradation that transitions from that shadow to light, or from the light into the shadow. There's a gradation from it. It hardly is ever, unless the light is like directly on the face, that you would see just really white and then really dark shadows. It would have to be something like a flashlight, right? Or something of that nature for that to really be the case. But for the most part, shadows are always followed by midtones and highlights. Yeah, it's a comment that I left for one of the videos that I watched. That's how I found out about it. Like, I visited your channel, I saw that you were like making music, and I clicked on one of them to see what it's about, and then I just left you a comment about it. So check that out. I think it should be on, like, once you log in or something, there should be some sort of notification about it. But yeah, I'm just throwing it out there if you're interested. That space is open for you. I really want to get more viewers to be connected with the Art Lounge Alley, for you guys to share your content, because that's really what it's about. To inspire you guys, to connect you guys with each other, to present new content. And I think your style of music, or what you're using, it's not something that I've seen very often, or I might have come across it a long time ago or something, but I never really quite grasped it. So I think it would be a pretty cool introduction to everybody else that's watching, for them to see what it's about, what the process is like. Have you done any performances or anything, or DJing? I do have Boomy3 says, do you have a Discord server? I do have a Discord server. It's specifically for the Art Lounge Alley. I could send you that. We could talk through there if you're up for it. But a lot of this stuff is very, very new. I just recently, well, I'm not going to say recently because it's been 3 months probably, that I launched my Patreon page, and part of the tiers, the benefit tiers, is you get access to the Discord server. It kind of brings everybody together. But yeah, we could talk about that later. I'm just more interested in getting more special streams, getting people more familiar with all this different content. So I'm not going to spend way too much time with the rendering. Just going to do a couple of more touch-ups here and there. And then I'll present you guys with the new lesson for the day. Also very important. Boomy3 says, I feel like your content is so underrated, it's almost criminal. Well, thanks, man. So much valuable knowledge, and I'm glad you're sharing it with the world. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm having a blast with it. I'm enjoying sharing all this info. I think, art in general is incredibly important. I don't think it's something that's just entertainment. I think it's something that gives people voice. It gives people opportunity to express themselves, and get things or ideas out and connect with people in a way. So whatever medium that is, whether it's music, whether it's illustration, writing, poetry, whatever it is, I always really like to inspire that, and I think it helps people grow as people, as opposed to just being focused on money, because with those choices, it really shapes character, it shapes people's sense of self-esteem, perspective on life, just having interesting things to talk about, interesting things to think about. I don't think that And something I talk about very frequently is this idea of how capitalism kind of destroys all that, because they want people to be drones. They want people to not question the process of how to make money for them. They want people to be obedient, which means they have to really sacrifice and swallow a lot of their personality and expression and so on and so forth, where they have these very rigid policies about how you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to act. And considering that people are in an office like pretty much their entire life, if they're working in an office that's like 15 hours of their day of being in that mode, being this person who has to avoid all these things that has to do with themselves. And they have to be this like cookie cutter personality to avoid any sort of problems or whatever for that sort of thing. So I think it programs people, and people kind of get stuck in this loop. And I think art takes that out of takes people out of that. It takes them out of this like rigid sort of reality and kind of like snaps them into existence, snaps them into like experiencing life and for themselves, in their own perspective, in their own vision. So if I could teach people to do that with illustrations, great. That's really the goal here. That's one of the reasons why I do like special streams, and I try to include all different types of content, whether it's like music videos or instruments or like other artists, or other people who have like inspired artists. Like I did a special stream about CBGBs, which was created by Hilly Crystal, and he was really big on giving people like platform to express themselves. Boomy3 says, I feel like art expresses things that's hard to put into words. Yeah. It's all sorts of stuff. There's people who are very good at doing it emotionally, and they're very good at doing it with color, for example. So when it comes to like, abstract painting and like paintings done by Kandinsky, who's an old school painter, who was actually, I believe, like he was like a mathematician for some time, and then he quit. And he decided to go into like abstract painting, and he did some amazing paintings. And he had something called synesthesia, which is like you could see color by when you play a note. So like a C would be like a yellow. They would actually see yellow color emanating when that note is played. And because of this condition that he had, he drew paintings, or he painted paintings that depicted that. So like all the paintings kind of had this like symphony going on. It's really fascinating. I was completely blown away when I read about that and I heard about that condition. I was like, what? There are people out there who are walking around and they're seeing color from noise, from just sounds and stuff. It must be a really wild experience. It's like you're constantly tripping all day, basically, and you're just seeing color moving around everywhere. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, his work is abstract. It's not like figurative or anything, and he just uses colors and how he combines them together to create these symphonies. It's really interesting work. And of course, as older and more experienced he became, the better and better his paintings became. But yeah, some people are excellent at that. They're able to like express themselves more abstractly and conveying a certain emotion or ideas through that. And it's all sorts of stuff. There are people who are excellent in doing that with like stories. They're able to tell stories, and those stories are just like a summarization of their point of view and stuff, or they use like characters to depict personality traits or behaviors or expressions and experiences that they've had. It's so much. There's a lot to it, and that's the beauty of it, is that there's just so much variation to how people could express themselves, and because every single person sees things in a unique way, they might be looking at the same exact thing, but the emotions that they experience, the feelings and ideas that come through pouring in when they look at that, is so much to do with that specific person. That's why I think it's important, and I think it's criminal that cultures try to like make that more and more difficult. Like with all these jobs that are specifically for like capitalism, which again it like pushes on a very rigid kind of asleep sort of state of like people just thinking about, well, how do I make the most money? How do I scam people out of whatever to make more money? And just like rots the soul, basically. Like when people become so obsessed with capital, with making as much money, they just become rotten people, because they're all boundaries are or limits are off. It's just like, if you can get away with it, then great. That's just the idea of it, basically. Like, if you can scam people and make even more money, great. They don't, when you start setting limits, it's not capitalism anymore. It's like the antithesis of capitalism. Like in the definition itself, it even says it. Unregulated, so because of that, it makes people even more terrible. And that's why I speak against it so often on this podcast, because a lot of the things that we're seeing today is because of that. A lot of the things that are wrong, it's because of that, because people are like, hey, why am I going to go and do my job as a politician when I could just take all the tax money and fake it and say, hey, it's, this is the problem. It's not us, it's somebody else that's really doing things wrong, and pocket more and more and more of it. Because now they're in a position, and to boot them out is like an entire process. So it corrupts people. When people are just thinking about that, and that's their only concern in life, awful. But art, on the other hand, is about connection. It's not about just, how do I make myself look amazing, or how do I just collect all this stuff for myself so I can be incredibly powerful or whatever. A lot of it, like real art, is about connection with people, and like creating this like, or like highlighting the human experience, even though it could be individualistic at some point. That's why we could relate to things, like certain songs that people sing about, they're talking about their experiences in a very like generalized way, but people like hear it and they think about their experiences, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened to me, and it starts to create this connection with like the songwriter and the artist and the audience. So like it creates this harmony, and it's kind of the opposite. It's the opposite of what capitalism aspires to do, or what it teaches people to do. I got carried away with this, and I started like shading more of it. But I'm gonna go into the next lesson, which is gonna be hands. This is gonna be really exciting. I'm actually pretty excited to start showing you guys this, and I'm gonna do it on this page, just to give you an example of it, and very similar to how you would start off with like drawing the head, right? Or just like any figure drawing. As I mentioned before, the best way to go about it is to do like a quick sketch, a general sketch using basic shapes, so that you have an idea of like, well, how big do I want it to be on this page? You know, how much space do I want it to be, to take up in this area. So if you do a quick sketch and you get all the major shapes out, then you have less to worry about in the long run. You know, if you just start out, as I mentioned before, if you start out by doing a lot of detail in the finger, and then by the time you get to the base of the finger, you realize like the rest of the hand has to be as big as that finger, otherwise it's going to be disproportionate, and you might not even have enough space on paper or in that section. And you know, you're gonna have to start over again. Or if you go into a lot of detail, and by the time you get to like the base of the arm or the hand, you're just like, well, it's not really fitting, or it's not in the position that I want it to be. You know, the whole idea of like composition, of like where do you want it to be positioned, whether it should be off to the side, to the middle, that comes into play at the beginning as well. So the same way as with the head, you know, this is the same idea here. So as you could see, I started out with like, looks like a box basically, right? And that just gives you the parameters for it, like, and it's not a perfect box, like not all the lines are parallel, because as you could see, you know, if you look at your own hand right here, it's a lot wider than it is going up towards where the fingers are. So like this kind of illustrates that. You could see that this area is wider as opposed to that. So over here, I'm going to divide it. I'm going to have 3 lines basically to divide it into 4 little sections for the fingers. And while this is, or it does look very technical, right? Like this seems to be the opposite of like what people would think of like when they're thinking about drawing, or when it comes to art. A lot of people think like, oh, it's a very fluent or like flowing sort of experience. It shouldn't be as like rigid and technical and stuff. And while that is true, in the beginning, it's good to get used to seeing things proportionately, seeing things as they are. And then as your eye becomes more and more used to it, the easier it's going to be for you to be able to just do it, you know, like not have to go through these very like technical steps in order to get the results. You know, similar to, you know, as I mentioned earlier, to the idea of when you were learning to read, right? You had to like enunciate every single word. You had to spend some time thinking about it. You know, you had to recite the alphabet in order to remember how to pronounce certain letters. And that was a very technical process. But once you figured that out, you know, once you got used to it by repeating it over and over and over again, like you don't have to recite the alphabet now, right? You don't have to think about the letters or the words. You just read. So the same thing happens here. This is like this is like your alphabet stage. This is the stage where you just you're learning the basics. You're getting used to seeing things a certain way. But I did make this one a little bit too long, which is why it's important to keep it light, because I could erase stuff and it's not going to be permanently ingrained in the paper. So that distance between, like as you could see from the thumb up to right where the knuckles are basically, or where like the base of the finger is, that distance shouldn't be too wide. If you make that too wide, it's gonna break the drawing. It's gonna look weird. So you want to make sure you pay attention to that. And again, that's something that you get used to by just practicing drawing hands over and over and over again, the same way as you practice the alphabet over and over again. It's the same learning curve. So once you have this, you have this like box there, you have these divides. Now you could start working with the fingers, and it's the same idea. You're kind of you're filling up these areas using boxes as well. To get more familiar with 3-dimension of these features, that there's multiple planes. It's not just flat. There's like a plane here, there's a plane here as well. So these boxes help that out. Help you get that understanding. And as I mentioned, like this kind of stuff, like working with clay does that as well, because you really start to understand things 3-dimensionally. When you're drawing something, you're drawing only in one perspective, but working with clay, it allows you to really grasp how everything starts to form. And because of that, and because it allows you to like move things around, mold things a little bit, you get a better and better grasp of all these features. And as I mentioned, you could always use it as reference. Like you could change its perspective according to how you want it, as opposed to like photograph or just working off of photos as references. You don't have that pliability. But if you take some time and you work a little bit with clay, you get a more in-depth understanding of these features, whether it's hands or whether it's the face. It allows you to do that, and it transitions into your drawing. And something I mentioned before, a lot of artists use multiple mediums to achieve better drawing, like Gil Elfgren. Now this is a special stream that I recently had. You guys could check that out by heading over to the video section and filtering the videos based on collection, where you'll see a highlights folder, and in that highlights folder you'll see the special streams. But yeah, he's an amazing pinup artist, beautiful work, beautiful paintings. But he was also a photographer. He was known for being a really good photographer, and but his choice was to paint. He really enjoyed painting, so whatever medium he used to help him get better at that, he took advantage of it. So photography, if you pick up clay, it doesn't mean that you have to become a sculptor, unless you really like it, in which case why not. But it doesn't necessarily need to substitute. So I think sometimes, and I remember having some debates with people where they were saying, well, for instance, with hyperrealism, they're like, if you're going to paint hyperrealism, why not just take a photo? Like, what's the difference? And I think that this kind of points that out, is that it's not about the result only. It's not about like trying to get like the most realistic drawing. It's also about the medium and the experience. So if a person really likes to paint, and their choice is hyperrealism, then whatever ways they can achieve that, if they have to work off a photograph or that sort of thing, then it's fair game. He doesn't need to become a photographer because he's interested in hyperrealism. It's just a choice of what you really enjoy doing. And I think a lot of people forget about that. When they're pursuing careers as artists of some sort, they start focusing way too much on perception of like what other people think or how they're going to receive it. And they kind of forget like the entire purpose of why they chose to go into this field is because they really liked the medium, whether it is photography or it is painting or it's drawing. That's what you're doing it for. You're doing it because that medium really speaks to you. It really, carries you away into like this creative state of mind. So yeah, basically what I was getting at was use clay as your guide when it comes to the figure, or when it comes to certain features or whatever, as a way to understand it better three-dimensionally, and then use that as your reference when you're like looking at it for, like, let's say you want to understand lighting better. This is perfect. You could move it around however you like. You could move the light source around however you like, and you're still able to see the features the way you want to see them. You could have it from the bottom up, or you could have it facing more towards you, and have the light source from the top down. The options are limitless. Basically, you really have so much variety when it comes to these things, when it comes to light source, when it comes to perspective, when it comes to anatomy as well. Once you nail it, once you spend some time and you understand it better, it's always at your disposal. Boomy, if you're in chat still, do you have like a favorite artist that kind of like pushes or inspires you when it comes to your work, or when it comes to you creating your music? I think that's always a really helpful part as well, is just having that around. For me, having to look at comic books or looking at paintings and stuff, it's always a good, refreshing sort of experience of like, oh yeah, this is what it's about. This is beautiful work. And it kind of like gets me going to like sit down and create. And just like all these other artists that I was talking about with Gil Elfgren, even in that case, like how many artists inspired him, I think are all just indications of how people are connected with one another when it comes to art. Like if you guys remember, Sunblum was like a huge inspiration for him. Like that's where most of his style and interest really came from. So it's just this like continuous evolving sort of influence that people have on each other, and I'm sure Sunblum was influenced by somebody else, and etc., etc., etc. It's just these artists inspiring each other to continue to create content, to continue to express themselves. Which is why I'm so excited to share with you guys the third part, which is going to be this Friday. Just want to make sure Oh man, I'm way over. Well, not way over, but past the time for this stream, everyone. I'm gonna take a short break. It's not gonna be 5 minutes. It's gonna be less than that to get ready for the next stream, which is gonna show you guys the special intro. I'm pretty excited about that. I think you guys are gonna enjoy it as well. So if you do enjoy the content, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. They both help the stream grow, and of course they're greatly appreciated by yours truly. And I'll see you guys in the next stream. Welcome, viewers, to our Lounge Alley. This is Coloring Comics, but before I jump into today's session, I'm going to show you guys this cool intro. It's something that I came across, and I thought the animation is absolutely amazing. The color scheme is beautiful. The cinematography is great. Not going to ruin it. I'm not going to talk about it too much. But they're just taking it to the next level. As you could see, it's combination of both 2D and 3D animation. And you could obviously see some influences there from other animations, but as something I was talking about previously, that makes no difference. It's the whole idea is the inspiration. As I was talking about, Gil Elfgren and Sumblum, they both shared the same interests. Gil Elfgren took it to the next level. He shared the love that he had for pinup art, and he was able to just create something even more amazing. Well, not even to say, comparison. There isn't really. Each one of them had their own thing, their own themes, their own interests, their own poses, and so on and so forth. But it's just to highlight how through this inspiration, people create something more interesting and or even more interesting content. Just adding the number of things that people can explore and get into. But yeah, here it was absolutely incredible. My favorite part of that was when the dog runs to grab the soda that fell on the floor, and he sees the Hero X and all the other agents, I guess, fighting on the floor and then moving up towards the gate on the store. That was really creative. I mean, the whole thing was incredible, and I like the idea that his superpower is kind of to shift dimensions, like how he's able to just go from more into a 2D world basically, and then transport himself to like all these different dimensions and realms. Incredible work, absolutely beautiful. And I'm hoping that the series is going to be just as great, because the trailers usually are very high budget, I guess, or like they're the highest budget, and then the rest of the episodes tend to be less so, which is frustrating. I feel like they should just continue that and focus more on developing some really amazing content, because obviously that team is incredibly skillful. They're incredibly professional, so to give them even a bigger budget to make sure that the entire series is just as good would be great for the people who are contributing to it. In the long run, there's going to be way more people buying content or tuning in or subscribing, whatever it is that's going to come out of it. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it, Boomy. Me too. I was blown away the moment I saw it, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great content to share with people, for them to get inspired by, hopefully. And animation is really cool. Like, I did a little bit of work, a little bit of like traditional animation a while back, and it was laborious. Like, there was a lot that went into it. In fact, I spent a lot of hours, like, I'm going to say like 14 hours a day for like a week or so, just getting the website ready. And it was like a 2-minute animation, maybe even less. I don't remember exactly. It was a while back, but there was a point where I was working on all that stuff, and this is a while back. This is like when Flash was the thing. Flash was the app. Absolutely horrendous application. It was awful, so unreliable. Like, it crashed on me after I think I spent like 2 to 3 days working on the animation, and I didn't hit save. I would just kind of work on it, then go to sleep, wake up, and continue on it. I didn't like close it down or anything like that. And the next day I got up, I started working on it, and in the middle of all of it, it showed like that that loading icon, and I thought it was like saving it, and then everything got deleted. Like, the past 2 days, I think, that I was working on it, completely wiped out all that work. I was so livid. I was so frustrated with that, but I just continued. I was like, well, what else am I gonna do? I'm just gonna have to keep going with it, and eventually finished it up. But it was still a lot of fun. I had a great time. Great time learning how the body moves. How you would have to actually animate all those parts, and what do you have to pay attention to in order to make it look like a really believable motion. Just having to pay attention to all these little parts of motion to get it down. It was a really cool experience, and I do want to get back into it at some point, but it's just so much to learn. So much to do and so little time. Uh-oh. That does not look good. That looks watery. Gotta give it a good shake. So those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, this is John Buscema's beautiful work. One of my favorite artists. He is my current huge inspiration. Although there are so many artists that I guess I've been focusing on and discovering, one of them being Paul Azaceta. I did a special intro, and in fact you guys can check out the special intro for John Buscema by heading over to the video section and filtering based on collections, and then you'll see a folder. It's the highlights folder where you'll find all the previous special streams that I've had. Gonna have to add more color here. So next is gonna be red. Yeah, you could see the 5-minute video that I created. It's like a short flick that I made about John Buscema, talking about his journey to becoming an illustrator at Marvel, and just giving you guys like really cool images to view of his work, like some sketches that he's done, just demonstrating how well he understands like the whole process, you know, the anatomy, emotions, expressions, body language, perspectives, like all of that. That's all kind of highlighted there. I combined this little reel to demonstrate that. Of course, it doesn't summarize the vast amount of work that he's done and how great it is, but it does give you guys a little bit of an idea of who he was, what kind of work he's done, how much he's done. He has a huge body of work, and you guys can also see intros to other artists that I've done in the past, like Mobius being one of them, also another favorite artist of mine. Eduardo Risso, another excellent artist, and all of them have their own style. They're all very unique. They have their own kind of voice through the line work that they create, and how they tell stories. They're all very unique in their own right. So that's a lot of fun. You guys can also check that out. That's also in the collections folder. And yeah, that's who you're seeing here today. This is John Buscema's Conan the Barbarian, something he's well known for. It's issues that he's done, like, I think he's done over 200 issues of Conan the Barbarian. And that's just Conan the Barbarian. He's done pretty much an issue for every major Marvel character, every major Marvel title. Like, he's done long-standing work on Thor. He's done long-standing work on Fantastic Four as well. That's another one that he's well known for back in that time. But yeah, Conan the Barbarian, he has like a huge collection, a huge body of work. So I'm gonna go back and try to correct this, because this seems a little too much like the bricks. Whereas it's supposed to be more yellow than green. Boomy3 wrote, have you seen the show on Netflix called Blue Period? I haven't. I don't have Netflix. I'm kind of like anti-Netflix. I kind of like download content from them. But I will check out Blue Period. And he says it's about a person who finds out he doesn't want to take the safe path and decides to become an artist. It really displays the thoughts of an artist and the challenges we face. Highly recommended. It really made me relate, and I got inspired. All right. Well, that's good. That's good. That sounds like a really good movie. It sounds like something I would really, really enjoy. Yeah, I'll check that out. Thanks, Billy. Blue Period. I'll check that. There's another one called Pop. Damn it. What was it called? It was also about that kind of, but it was talking about how one person strived to become an artist, and it was only through generations that, like, I guess his bloodline was able to achieve artistic endeavor. American Pop, that's what it was called. And it's an animation. It's beautifully done. It's not 3D. It's not 3D rendered. And I think it's on Amazon Prime. Like, you could go and check that out on Amazon Prime. And it basically talks about that, and like just some of the struggles of being an artist as well. I have to rewatch it actually, but I remember when I watched it, I was like, oh, this is incredible. Like, beautiful animation, beautiful color work, all of it combined together. But thanks for sharing that. That's very cool. I'm actually I'm excited to watch that. I need to see some new content. Boomy3 says, oh yeah, Blue Period is an animation and has 12 episodes. All right. Yeah, American Pop is just a movie. It's not a series. Just a note. But it doesn't make a difference. I mean, it's just about the content, really. And I think, on that topic about taking the safe path, it's incredibly frustrating, because if you look back in time, I'm gonna say even during a period of like Allen Ginsberg, he's like a poet, and some of the stuff that he wrote was also about how capitalism kind of like sucks out any sort of creativity people have, and how at the end of the day they're just so depleted basically by the amount of work that they have to put in, or the amount of I'm going to say inhibition that they go through, that it just kind of like sucks out any of that inspiration. And there are a couple of like poems that he wrote and just like expressed his ideas and thoughts about it. But I think in that time period, it wasn't as bad, I think, as it is now. Like, I think back then, if somebody wanted to pursue the artistic field, they were able to do it, but it would be pretty a pretty tight sort of existence. You wouldn't really have that much space, or you wouldn't have that much money to save, whereas now it's almost impossible, because of how high inflation is in comparison to wage. Like that's something I mentioned very frequently. Minimum wage hasn't been raised since 2009. So that's that's like 13 years, basically. 13 years of nothing, but everything else has been going up. So if a person wanted to pursue something that didn't fall into the category of like finance or basically white collar work, they're even more so, they're more screwed. And it's almost intentional. It's been this like long battle basically between people who want to pursue like an artistic career and those who are quote unquote being responsible, as what they like to say, to make themselves feel better that they didn't pursue it, or they didn't take the risk of pursuing it. But yeah, it's that idea that it's that safe route is becoming the only route little by little, and not enough people are pushing against it, to make it so that that isn't the only option. Like, I remember there was a point where I was talking to some people, and I was like Ubering, and I had somebody who was making conversation, and they were talking about how they work in Wall Street, and they were looking for roommates. A Wall Street worker was looking for roommates. Like, they couldn't even afford their own apartments in New York City. And I just, like, it hit me even more so. I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, if the entire point of getting those kind of jobs is so that you could actually afford your own place. But even that is becoming ridiculously expensive, where people can't even afford their own place working in these industries. That's how high greed has become, like, to a point where, it only, a sense of freedom or a sense of, like, comfort financially is only becoming like a 1% kind of thing. And the more that's being pressed on a person, the less they are open to thinking creatively, right? Like, they're like consumed by the idea of finance, about money. Whereas I think during, let's say, Allen Ginsberg years, like the 70s, 80s, like, even though that theme is still there was more opportunity for people to be able to pursue that, to be able to push their limits and get into a creative state of mind. And I think another book that really highlights that is Fountainhead. It's Ayn Rand, and it talks about that. It has these characters that kind of represent each of those things. Like, there's Howard Roark, who's the main character, who is pretty much the protagonist in the story, and then there's like Keating, which is like his quote unquote rival, right? Like, well, Keating sees Howard Roark as a rival because Howard Roark is just really in tune with, like, the artistic process, and that's where Keating wants to be, and he kind of starts, like, doing whatever it takes to get there. He just kind of represents that opportunist, in the same way that, like, a capitalist would be as well, like, just seeking for ways to overcome somebody. So instead of thinking about the artistic process, he starts thinking about the person and obsessing over them and trying to, like, one-up them and prove that he's better than. Whereas Howard Roark spent most of his time trying to come up with the next architectural design. He had all these visions about what he wanted the buildings to look like, and so on and so forth. It's a really cool book. It really does talk a lot about the artist spirit, in a sense, or like the biggest difference between people who are consumed by capitalism and those who aren't. Those people who actually choose to pursue that career, and what really comes with the territory, in a sense. Like, when people pursue capitalism, like, what comes with that territory, and how that warps and shapes your priorities and interests and how you view others. That competitiveness that becomes really toxic, and it kind of, like, it makes the person lose this I'm gonna say, like, holistic approach towards life, towards relationship, towards people, and becomes consumed by the ladder climbing. It's similar to that other that movie Wall Street, not the remake, but the original with Michael Douglas. Like it talks about all that stuff as well. It really highlights all that. Boomy3 says, I wish I had the confidence to pursue art head on, though my family isn't a fan of that. I'm currently in a bachelor's program about IT and computers. After I have my degree, I can at least try to make art into something I do full time. My dream is to be able to do art for a living. Go with it, man. Go with it. Because your parents are always going to be concerned about you making money. It's not, I don't think you should take it personally. I don't think you should take it as like them thinking you're incapable of it or that it's a bad choice. It's just they know it's a risky field. It's been programmed in their head to look at it that way. That's what, if you look at media, what media has been doing, what a lot of like social interaction and people who have also gave up on it, the way they justify it is by convincing others that it's a bad choice as well. So there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of jealousy, a lot of uncertainty, and sometimes people do that. They project things. So if they failed at it, then they're going to feel better about it by saying, hey, that's a field that's really dicey. It's something that really requires somebody, because they probably didn't push themselves hard enough. They got shot down. Their parents told them that. So pay attention to your endeavors. Don't focus so much on that. And plan B is always good. And something that I mention very frequently is, as long as you're putting some amount of time, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, even if it's just an hour every day, you're getting that much closer, and you're staying in the artistic mindset, in the artistic spirit. You're still staying there. Whereas if you take breaks for weeks and then you can jump back into it, and then you take breaks for weeks, you're breaking that momentum, that connection. So like my advice to you is, do that, pursue that bachelor's, but more so work on your art, and just like build yourself a goal. Like be like, okay, in 5 months I'm gonna create an album. I'm gonna create or song. It doesn't even have to be an album, but like you could be like, in 5 months I'm gonna create a song, or be even more determined and be like, 2 months I'm gonna create a song, and before you know it, you have 2 songs, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you have an album. And there's no pressure there. There's nobody who's gonna tell you like, hey, you gotta get this done by so and so. So you could really put in a lot of your feeling into it, a lot of what you want into it, without the pressures of like deadlines or anything like that, but giving yourself a goal and saying like, okay, in like 2 months I'm gonna have that. And that way you have 2 things that you're working towards, and then you could switch over because you're getting more work done for your music. You're creating more content, and you could then, once you have an album out, you could start reaching out to people or DJing or whatever, and just kind of juggle those things until you could transition into like more of a permanent thing. But don't give up on it. That's my number one advice to you, is like stick to it as much as possible. And I got the same exact lectures as well about it, and like how it's not a safe field or whatever else, but I stuck to it, and I started doing things full time. I started doing like comics full time. So it pays off. It pays off if you're determined, you know. And it pays off if you're really dedicated to it. Like not focusing on trying to prove anybody wrong, you know, or like any of that stuff. Just focus on it because it's something you love doing, you know, and that's something that brings out you, like who you are as a person. That's the most important thing. That's what it's really about, you know. I think that's what I think is going to bring you results, is when you are in that zone and thinking about it as like something you enjoy doing, you know, not because like, oh, I got to make a career out of it or whatever else. And being in the position that you're in, that's perfect, because you're still not burdened yet by having to also pay bills as much as, at least I don't think you are, from what it sounds like. Yeah, no problem. Glad I could contribute a little bit to helping you stay inspired. It is, I think, the most important and most crucial part of existence is retaining that individuality that you have, and retaining the ability to express your emotions and thoughts and ideas and feelings. It's absolutely essential. Is it music that you want to push, or is it something else? Is it a different art field? Alright, I think I did enough with the backgrounds, and actually this area is really light. Got so carried away trying to get the light right. Didn't realize that this needs to be white. Boomy3 says, I was more into music a few years ago, but drawing landscapes, characters, and possibly creating stories with those skills is what I really want to do. Alright, man. You're in the right place. This is really what the inspiration here is for. I'm currently studying, Boomy3 says, I'm currently studying the skeleton for my character drawing. Yeah, that's a really great place to start as well. It's I say it's more simple, you know, and it's the foundation basically. So once you get that down, layering on top of that, you get better results, you know, as opposed to starting out right away with like characters. You kind of have to like juggle multiple things. Not only are you trying to create the character and you know, having to understand the proportions, the anatomy, and everything else. So like starting out with the skeleton is a really good place to go. And what I also really enjoy about that is everything is there for you. Like, you know, you just need paper and a pen, paper and pencil, and you can create an entire world. Like, you are the director, you're the actor, you know, you're the cinematographer. Everything is there in your hand, and you're able to create, you know, stories. You're able to create emotions, and you're able to express like all these different ideas that you have, or experiences that you've had, all on paper, and it creates these like awesome worlds. That's one of the things that really really pushed me towards doing comics. Like, I love fine art as well. I'm really into paintings as well, but I think just this idea of like being able to create all these stories really gravitated me towards comics. Boomy3 says, at first I was drawing simple shapes of the body, but now I want to go deeper into it. I want to know how the body moves, how it rotates and behaves. Since I already have basic drawings, I thought it would be nice to start drawing skeletons. All right. Yeah, that's excellent. That's also really, really important too. It's something that I was talking about earlier as well. It's like, you know, getting the anatomy down and proportions, that's all really important. But body language also plays a big role. Like, if you were to look at, you know, John Buscema's work, and if you were to look at that short film that I made, it shows like certain images that he did, and just simple lines that he used created such body language. You know, it showed expression, it showed, and that's because he understood how the body moves, you know, how it rotates, and that allowed him to exaggerate certain things, you know, or to emphasize certain things and still make it look believable, and at the same time bring the viewer into the scene. So I think it's also really crucial as a way of like being able to tell the story or engage the viewer in a compelling way. Because I see a lot of art, like on Instagram, you know, I see some artists who are pursuing it, and they do really beautiful, like renderings of the human figure or the female figure, but it lacks luster in terms of the pose. You know, like what is the person really doing? And sometimes that question is really, it makes the drawing look confusing. Like, if you look at it, you're like, what is exactly going on? Like, I saw recently, there was an image of one character, and he was diving towards another one from the top down. Like, they jump down towards them, and the other character is meeting them. But the person that's meeting them, they have a bow in their hand, and the bow is like facing downwards, but their face is showing anger. So you kind of look at that pose and you're like, what's going on here? Like, where's this going? Like, they're just gonna clash into each other. You know, his hands are all the way in the back, the bow's in the back. So what's exactly going on here? And they're very close to each other. So it's like, you know, you could draw something, but at the same time, you kind of have to ask yourself the question, like, what are they trying to achieve here? Or like, what's the pose suggesting? You know, or that sort of thing. So sometimes people kind of disconnect things. They're like, I'm going to draw a really cool action scene, but what is that action really saying? Or where is it going? You know, so I think that's also really important to consider. But you're on the right track. That's excellent to go from that and move towards how the body's moving. It's very challenging as well. It's a really It's a really challenging one, but I think you'll learn a lot from that. And by like struggling with it, or like, you know, having to redo it and do it over and over and over again, you'll get even better. My best advice would be to not give up no matter what, and just like, if things get challenging, look at that as like a wall to break through. You know, just keep chiseling away at it, and you will absolutely break through it. It's kind of like what I was talking about earlier with that animation that I was doing, and having that app crash on me after like 2 days of like 14 hours working on it, all of it just being wiped away. You know, I had a choice there. I could have just like said, oh, screw it, you know, this is like really frustrating, I just spent all that time, and it's all gone. You know, all that work, all that understanding of how it's animated and everything, all of it just gone in like a matter of a second. I could have just walked away from it, but I chose to see it as a challenge. I was like, well, you know what? It's like, fuck it. Like, it happened. I'm pissed. I'm gonna spend even more time now getting it done. It just seemed like a roadblock. It was like, just when things started to look good, it had to crash on me. Like, I was so livid about that. But it's just to say, just look at things as a challenge when things start to get tough, as opposed to like an indication of like whether you got it or not. But it sounds like you're already heading in the good direction. I mean, having to pick up basics and then moving on to body movements, that's a really good direction. I mean, it shows that you're pretty dedicated. Kind of working on every panel here to make sure I didn't miss much. I'm gonna do a little bit of work on his boot to get the right color, and I'm gonna have to call it a night, ladies and gents. As much as I'm having a blast, you know, talking about all this stuff, hearing thoughts from Boomate, I think this is a lot of fun, but I'm gonna have to call it short after this. But I will be back tomorrow for the project stream, which is going to be me working on personal work from my imagination. You guys can check that out to see the progress on it. Unfortunately, yesterday it all kind of crashed. Well, it didn't crash on me, it's just the audio was completely screwed. But I'm going to be continuing on tomorrow. It's getting further and further along. I'm pretty excited about it. You guys could see the progress then. That's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Friday is going to be the special intro, where I'm going to continue to talk about Gil Elfgren and his inspirations. I'm going to be showing you guys more paintings. I'm going to be talking about the paintings and their techniques and a lot of stuff. It's going to be a blast. It's most likely going to be the entire stream. So I welcome all you guys to come and check that out. That's going to be Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It might be even past an hour. It's going to be Friday. I might just take more time to talk about stuff and stream. Boomy said, learning the skeleton has been so beneficial so far. For example, I was drawing the scapula and noticed that the acromion, not really sure what that is. You're ahead of me on that. Is actually sticking out of the body and shows through your skin. Such details I would never think about before. Yeah, actually, that's like one of the benefits about it. Once you start noticing or learning these terms for certain body parts, it makes you pay attention to them. You know, when somebody highlights that, they're like, oh, it's this muscle and it's called this. Now you know that muscle and you know where it's going to be located. So like you change the position of the body or the figure or the body part, and since you know how that muscle is forming on the arm, let's say, and the arm twists, now you could continue paying attention to that muscle and seeing how that's forming around based on the movement. And that really helps as far as like constructing the figure in different angles and different perspectives. You're not always going to draw, you know, like a straight on sort of view as you see here. You want to vary your panels. You want to be able to tell the story and in a diverse and interesting way. You know, you don't want to just keep reusing the same perspective. So it becomes really helpful to recognize things in that way. Yeah, keep at it. It sounds like you're really digging it. Sounds like you're having a great time. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is a blast. If you guys enjoy the content, make sure you remember to hit the like and subscribe button. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for more figure drawing basics and the project stream.